Real quick up front, I run, my last job was in TRADOC and Arctic, working with the REF, working with Jamie and those kind of groups and pieces on how do we accelerate technology. But I was also the lead bureaucrat for all of that and got challenged on why we didn't do anything, because there are a few bureaucracies that go out there. What I got really enamored with is small companies and the innovation approaches they do, but of course we didn't have a requirements document to do anything with them, so we couldn't transition them. So how do we know about them? How do we figure out that they've got social networking capability, or if they've got this, and how do we get it into requirements documents? And what I got sent out and got offered to see, or sent by my 4-star to go look at GD that was standing up this thing called The Edge. And it was a different approach. It was about open collaboration, using a big company to pull stuff forward, but also getting exposure to technology. I like that, and I got offered the opportunity, so now I do that now. So we have about 17 centers, 3 of them virtually, that we collaborate in. I've got over 500 members, small business and large business, but mainly small, and universities. And I run like a technology capability dating service. I look for those that have a capability, link them up with those that need a capability. Don't guarantee they like each other today, but next month there might be a program or an opportunity, and they love each other. So it's about working as a network solution to get innovation, because innovation just doesn't happen on its own, especially in government bureaucracies of how you go do that stuff. So you got to understand who's the right people to touch, what's the right program. You know, the defense innovation market's a super place to go, but you got to know how to do the follow-on steps once you do there. So that's what we try to do is a group try to go solve that. One of the areas that's really key to me, and what started in the process actually when I was back in TRADOC, is we started this concept called the human dimension, where we figured out the future conflicts was potentially more about humans and less about the kinetic operations. Because one, we're pretty good at the kinetic operations, but you got the socials, you've got all the aspects of dealing with different cultures, not to mention our own soldiers and service members. So we created a document called the Human Dimension, which has been, as a concept document, it's percolating. General Brown at Leavenworth is now making major pushes to develop capabilities documents that deal with achieving cognitive dominance. So again, I go to the social network one, which would be key to having a play in the cognitive dominance piece. So as we go through that, we run into challenges too, because we got billions of dollars being spent on material solutions, but the human is not part of that program until you hand it to them, and then it doesn't work. And we talk big data, we talk confusing, we talk everything else. And luckily I got introduced to all these neurocognitive scientists, and I'm going, holy cow, why didn't we know this? So what I'm going to talk to you about is, and actually the Army Chief of Staff is running a program, has a study group that is looking specifically on enhancing human performance. So we're in collaboration, and I have a lot of EDGE members that deal in this field. What I'd like to cover here in a very short period of time is what do we mean about enhancing human performance, okay? And I'm going to lean a little more to the bureaucracy side, because we can talk about this till the sun goes down, but if we don't have the documents and the processes and the knowledge, it won't get advanced. So I'm going to start out with a little physical domain analogy for you. When we go out and I've got a 6'6" task, it's 6'6" to get it to accomplish. And I got somebody that's 6'6" tall, and I got somebody that's 5'5" tall. Who do I pick to go do the task? Probably the 6'6" guy, okay? Now what if I've only got 5'5" people, but I got a 6'6" task? I give them technology called the ladder, and then they go accomplish the task. Problem is when we get into the cognitive domain, I don't have a clue how tall they are. They could be 5'5", they could be 7'2", they could be 1'9" in a particular functional area. We don't know what they stand to. And as a consequence, also, when we build the equipment that goes with these people, we treat everybody as they're a generic size 9, okay? Because we don't know what the sizes are. So what we are doing in the broad sense of the term is we're minimizing the potential of the greatest asset that we have on the battlefield, called the human, but yet we don't know who that human is or how he or she thinks and how he or she makes information. So I'm going to go through what I would call the steps, if we can go to the next slide, of what do we need to do to get to the next step. How do we make the human the most important thing on the battlefield and not all these toys and bells and whistles which are there to help us, but we forget that's got to be used by a human. So the first thing is, and I've tried after 6 years of this, and I had General Wallace all the time, don't talk to me about this brain stuff. Make it in other terms so I don't have to talk brain stuff. The neuroscience will call it wet work. The key is I finally come to the conclusion, we got to talk brain stuff. We got to bring the educational level of the Army leadership up to the same level that they understand the physical domain. So, for example, every soldier in the Army knows what the bicep muscle is. They know where it's located. They know how it applies to their function, and they know how to improve it. And we've built systems to help them improve it called the gym. Okay? Now, for everybody out here, many of you, whether you're industry or we get into decision making and leadership. Okay? So how many out there, since that's a critical asset that we write, document after document how to do that, how many out there understand the role of the amygdala in decision making? That's huge. It's all about the emotional component. It's how you suppress it. It's in competition. See, the point is that as professionals in our profession, we don't know the most important asset that we're dealing with or the science behind it because we treat it as a black box. So my first challenge is, because we're not going to move this anywhere, we're going to talk about historical examples, we're going to give leadership examples, whatever. But the whole point is, it's really a neurobiological action going on that has neurochemicals executing just like your biceps. You can improve it, you need to know how it operates, and you need to know how to grow it and make it more efficient. But more importantly is you need to understand the different potentials of the kids out there that you've got and how to maximize those potentials. And right now we don't go there, we don't know that, and that's the first step. So that's my first challenge to the Army, and I'll call it the neurocognitive leadership in the Army, maybe the Surgeon General officer or somebody else. Let's get the 101 course and let's bring our leaders up to the knowledge level they should be at as professionals if they're really interested in decision making. Next thing is a cognitive baseline. I'll use another physical example. When I bring you into the Army, I measure your shoe size because I understand that if you're a size 9 and I give you a size 15 or a size 2 shoe at boot and tell you to go on a road march, not only are you not going to do it well, you're going to be actually hindered by it. Okay? Again, we don't know what the cognitive shoe size is of our soldier. So we go the norm curve of a generic size 9, which we automatically do when we do that is we automatically disadvantage everybody that's not size 9. So you talk all the mission command systems we're building, all this big data systems we're building, everything else is to size 9. By the way, our education and training systems are just that way too. All right? So when we're in that piece, everybody's size 9, so we immediately disadvantage and we don't maximize the potential of those soldiers that are not size 9. Okay? But we had to decide, so the challenge now is, what are the different sizes? How do I measure what's out there? So, and by the way, what got amazed to me is, before I started this process, I really don't know. All I got's Myers-Briggs. I mean, who's going to tell me how to measure this stuff? But it's amazing what's out there on the science side, what's out there in the small business side, what's out there in the universities. It's there. So I'm arguing for development of a good enough cognitive shoe size. Just take today. By the way, the cognitive neuroscientists will say, well, it's not totally there. To move the decimal point, 0.001, we need to have more studies. Got it. Do the studies. But the kids are on patrol today. Give me something today so we can measure these kids so we understand where they are. And you'll understand a little bit more when I go further down the list. But we got to establish a baseline and understand once we have the baselines of what the kids are, and it's going to change over the day, based on your circadian rhythm or whatever else, stress, fatigue. It changes, so you got to be able to monitor changes. But the point is, I know where they start, I know how to train them, I know how to educate them, and I know how to grow that baseline. And more importantly is, when I get a 6'6" task, I know who can do a 6'6" task. And and assign appropriately. Because right now I assign a 6'6" task to a 5'5", they fail, and then I'm figuring out why did they fail. So that's the next step. We got to have a baseline. Without the baseline, we can go spend billions of dollars, but it's not going to solve and maximize the true human piece. And by the way, everything I'm saying here, the science is there. All right? We got to transition some of science. We got to make some of the science in military speak, but it's there. It can be used today. Oh, by the way, there's no requirement for it. Okay, so that was my fault. We still don't have that. But General Brown's working on that. The next one is when we make the requirements, and we're starting to see a little bit more called this term usability in an RFP. Well, can anybody define what usability means for a mission command system? Okay, I don't have a baseline, so I don't even know the is the usability for shoe size only size 9? Okay, if you don't have the baseline, how do I get to usability? So my argument is, and by the way, in Chapter 6 of the Defense Acquisition Guide, there's a whole chapter on human-centered engineering and design. Okay, nobody does it, but it's there. It's acknowledged. Okay, because we get enamored by the bright shiny objects without remembering that the bright shiny objects have to work with humans. Okay. So my argument to the requirements community and the acquisition community is have a KSA or KPP that makes the human part of the solution. They've got to be an integral piece of what you're doing. Okay? And then, by the way, you got to have the 2 steps 1 and 2 before that to actually be able to measure it and do that piece. But without a KSA, or you all know what a KSA and a KPP are? Is there anybody that doesn't know what that is? Okay. Key performance parameters, key system attributes. These are how you measure. Those are things you got to do, okay? Because the documents for an RFP could be this big, for example. But if there's not a KSA everybody pays attention to the KSA KPPs, okay? It's what they're going to fund. If it's not there, I think there's a boilerplate HSI in every requirements that gets ignored. For the most part. So the point is you got to make it a priority in the requirements process and systems to do that, which goes to the next step. Even if you have a KSA and KPP, how many do send on capture boards and stuff, red teams and all that stuff? Anybody? For those in industry that do that, fun events, the bottom line is we're trying to G2 what the PM's going to measure in Annex L. All right? And they say, normally they tell you 10% for this, 20% for that. How many times do you think they give any percentage to the human? 0. Okay, so I'm a capture manager in a company trying to compete, and we got to be the lowest bid number, okay? Because it's about lowest bid nowadays. It's got to be the lowest bid, so how do I do this? And oh, by the way, you're not grading the human as part of this, so even if I could do that, which we all can, by the way, it's a question of why would I? Because it's going to raise my costs, it's going to raise my bid and my chance to lose. So if you're not going to grade it in the evaluation, the RFP, guess what? You're not going to get it. So we got to understand how the system works. So we can talk, we're going to hear a lot of conferences about how you have to do all this. But if it's not in the RFP, it's not happening. So we got to understand that piece. And I would argue that we have found in multiple programs, including in my own, is that if you don't do it and you go to the NIE or do something else, you quickly find out the soldiers will vote. And they will vote maybe negatively, all right? And in which case you are now going back and re-engineering everything you did to make compliance to get the soldier to like it, which is probably going to cost you 4 times as much as opposed to if you did it up front. So that's a message for industry to think about. So. And we've learned that lesson in GD. I mean, we're going to have a human-centered design approach for everything we build. We are challenged on some of the cognitive standard side. The physical side you can pretty much get to. And the last thing is prioritize funding. Well, you just heard Jamie up here talking about all the gee whiz things there. Was there any human-centered stuff up there besides, there was all bright, shiny object stuff, okay? Unfortunately, a lot of the human aspects gets binned over into the medical, okay? And no offense against docs, but I had to work it. Docs like something broken so they can fix it. I don't want it to break, okay? I want to know that they are okay and I don't put them into a situation they break, but I have no way to do that. So the key is we We do need efforts there. We do need to do research, but it's got to be from an operational perspective, not a medical perspective. Medical, you get into HIPAA, you get into everything else. So, and understand the end state that we might be looking for here is the ability. There's lots of sensors out there right now. Anybody, GD Land Systems not here, so they won't build tanks, but I'll use tanks. How many sensors do you think are on a tank? Why do we put sensors on the tank? We got to figure out, is the operating specs of the tank up to the mission? So we have a whole process for those that aren't in military. When we go on an operation, we have pre-combat checks, we have pre-combat inspections, we do all of that stuff. Because we do not want a piece of equipment to go out that is not fully operational, or at least we know it's not, and we accept the risk that it's not being operational, okay? So not only do we have a whole bureaucracy and process to measure that with checklists and manuals and everything else, but we also have sensors on it, so we have during operation, the engine oil's low, we know it's low, we got to fill the engine, or we're getting low on this or whatever. So we do that for all our equipment because we want to understand the operational readiness of that piece of equipment. What do you think our operational readiness processes and systems are for the human? They show up, they're not in a body cast, they're going on patrol, okay? Should I be putting them on point? Okay, is he suffering TBI, PTSD? Did they get sleep deprived? Did he get a bad letter from home? What's going on here? Because I don't know. He's here, he shows up, we go out. The point is we don't need to invent new processes. We just need our own processes and give us the systems and processes to measure the readiness. If we have a baseline of the soldier shows up, does a quick test on an iPod or something, and figures out below baseline today. Why is he below baseline? Now, he's not a doc. He's not going to figure it out. But I might not want to put him on point today. Okay? Might not be a good idea. But right now, the leaders have absolutely no tools to do this. Okay? And we can get much better with physiological monitors. QEEG is a classic thing that we could be using for education and training, attention, the eye trackers. And by the way, these aren't these gunky things that you see, all the researchers use. They use those. There's companies out there that have streamlined things to use for, and sports is really pushing a lot of this as well that we could carry over for. The key is it's not a technology issue right now. It's an understanding that we need to do this. So I am seeing movement in the Army. The chief's pushing, everybody else is pushing, but we've got some educational processes to go with there. So I think that's about the time for any questions. If you're doing any work there, I'll be glad to meet you. By the way, anybody can join the Edge for free. Yes, sir. One of you.
Hi, I actually just I was up in Nashville yesterday, and I heard some similar kinds of issues being raised, and I was a little bit concerned that if you as a soldier, you as an airman, are in a position where they're constantly watching your mental awareness, and they're constantly wondering if you're going to go crazy or not, wouldn't that drive you crazy? I'm concerned about that additional level of pressure and the negative impact that could have on our people.
You mean sort of like flying a plane into a mountain?
Well, it would have been nice if they'd had that for him.
Yeah, well, see, the key is it's tough to... First of all, I'm not about discrimination. I'm about how do I maximize your potential, right. But I also have a mission requirement.
Yes.
Okay, so how do I achieve the mission? Do I just send everybody out there because they happen to sign up, or do I put them at the right jobs to do? So you're getting into the neuroethics argument that you can get into, and we're okay if we do everything that you just said for the physical. Mm-hmm. Okay, if somebody shows up with a broken arm, you're okay with me noticing that.
Right.
If you have a broken whatever, okay. Somehow, if I've got a broken neuron, mm-hmm. we don't want us to know about that. The point is again, operational effect. It's a social issue as much as anything else here. So, do we have to have protections? Absolutely. Can it be abused? Absolutely. But what I would argue is we're wasting a lot of time building systems to give to people that don't need them, or it's not going to help them, and or not giving people systems that they need that could help them.
I am absolutely 105% in agreement with you. Like I say, I'm a little bit concerned
But
about
we're gonna run into
the
that.
unexpected issues.
Anytime you touch the head, people get a little squirrely. But remember, our profession is about decision making. And I don't, we can talk heart, we can talk everything else. Guess where it occurs? It's in the head. Okay? Social is in the head. Culture is in the head. Moral is in the head. Everything that we value and stuff is a neural processing in the head. Okay? So we ought to understand how the neural processor works so we maximize that potential. Okay? By the way, I'm not arguing against you. That's a valid concern, and we got to have checks and we're a checks and balance society anyway. So, yes, sir.
Joe Palmer. My name is Wayne Stillwell. I'm a retired colonel. I run a small robotics company. As far as data,
Which company? Just
Stillwell Technology and
Okay,
Robotics.
yeah.
So LLC.
I used to do all the robotics requirements. So I was just, okay.
Yeah. So and I'll be giving a presentation pretty soon. Hope to stay and see it. There's a great amount of data through the mass online video games. Every soldier coming in the Army now actually has, in private databases, a great deal of explicit and inferential knowledge about their learning rate, their eye-hand coordination, sometimes their ethics capacities, and who they are in the frontier of that is quite available. And even if that's excluded, through all that we see going on with API and the ability to measure in joint training systems and individual training systems, that is quite capable. The cognitive mapping, I believe, is something that's quite possible now. Just in the same way, if we were trying to find out what makes the best soldier in urban terrain, is it upper body strength, is it peripheral vision, is it quick decision making? I do think that data is around and quite available, and I would agree with you. I think it is something that can be done sooner rather than later, put in deft hands. So I would just pass that on. I think that's, I believe that's really possible, sir.
Well, it's out there. That's not the challenge. We just don't have the system set up to go ask for it. I will build on something, because part of the thing is getting what I call experiential templates. You're going to have I'm sitting on a panel next tomorrow. Am I out of time? I'll end. But on training leaders in chaos, okay? And the bottom line is, the way you do that is you get them experience. Lots and lots of experience. So it moves from the frontal lobes, it goes to back, and you make instinctive decisions, not frontal lobe decisions, because if you're in frontal lobe, you're already in trouble, okay? And by the way, for most of you that don't know that, if you're under 30 years old, your frontal lobes may not be fully developed, so your ability to make a rational decision is hindered by the fact you haven't finished growing yet. Now, think of who our platoon leaders, company commanders, squad leaders are and where they are. So we've got to understand, we've got to build those experiential templates, because I would argue you may be put into chaos and operate in chaos, but your brain doesn't have to be in chaos when you're doing it. That's only if we haven't trained the kids to do that. So, okay, thanks.